Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to MMA Unhinged. We have a fantastic fight card. The UFC are coming back, and we've got Garry in the main event versus Prates. Should be a good one in the welterweight division. Before that, though, I'm going to go to my good pal over there in America. Oscar, how are you?
I'm very good. We had the week off to reflect on the greatness that was that Alexander Volkanovski victory. We're now talking about him perhaps surpassing Jose Aldo in the conversation. It's great times over here in the MMA universe. And I think the good times will keep on rolling with an event outside of the Apex with two high-level welterweights.
Yeah, Volkanovski is some boy. Regaining the throne against Diego Lopez, which was a fantastic fight. 5 rounds. They went toe-to-toe. They went to distance. But Volkanovski just showing, how great he is. His name literally comes to detail in this fight against Diego Lopez. He was a worthy challenger. Diego Lopez pushed the Australian. It was a fantastic fight. We talked about, maybe the UFC feeling a bit lackluster in the last few, weeks. This was the sort of card for me that, had to deliver. It did deliver, and it just sort of brought them fireworks, I feel like, to every fan again. Now we're excited to see what's happening in the future.
Yeah, with Volkanovski, he reminds us of, I would say, greater times. And Diego Lopez was kind of this new era representative. And Volkanovski, he made history, became the first man over 35 to win a title in this level of weight class. And he did it in epic fashion. Like, you could argue that he dominated this fight outside of the moments where he got rocked.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Diego Lopez obviously coming in there and showcasing his hands. Volkanovski showing how great he is. Like I said, there a fantastic win for him to get the belt back. I felt like it was a big one for him. Obviously, losing that belt, obviously, losing to Islam and obviously losing to Ilya. I felt like this one was a big one for him. He wanted to kind of prove to everyone that he's still one of the best 145 pounders, and if not one of the best 145 pounders that we've seen in UFC history. He went out there, he did his job, regained his throne. It was a feel-good moment inside of MMA, wasn't it?
Yeah, with Volkanovski, now is the time for him to, I would say, to return to that activity, especially with the new crop of guys that he's fighting, like Movsar Evloev. That is a fantastic fight. Evloev should have gotten this title shot instead of Lopez. He already beat Lopez, but the UFC wants to go for the exciting matchups. But I feel like with the Evloev win for Volkanovski, that would do a lot for his legacy. It doesn't matter how exciting the guy is or isn't. If he's a great fighter, that's a great name to have on your resume. And also, you have maybe Yair Rodriguez. I know it doesn't make sense, but looks like the UFC is interested. And Jean Silva is in the mix too. So I think Volkanovski now has a new crop of guys to beat down.
Absolutely agree. Fantastic win for Alexander Volkanovski in the main event, but in the co-main event, Paddy Pimblett showcasing and beating the haters, which were probably me, again, against Michael Chandler. I predict Chandler to win this fight, but I didn't think I'd see this happening in a million years, but it did happen. Paddy Pimblett went in there and absolutely dominated from pillar to post in Michael Chandler. It was just a one-way street, one-way traffic. Paddy Pimblett all the way from the start, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was very disappointing to watch as a Michael Chandler fan. Michael Chandler has been known to, even in a loss, to really put up a fight. In this fight, he landed a couple of good shots, but he was basically able to do nothing the whole fight. He was able to get a takedown, but did nothing with it. And on the feet, he was very low volume. Paddy Pimblett was pressuring him effectively. There's no doubt about it. Paddy Pimblett is a better fighter than the guy who fought Luigi Vendramini in his debut. But with Michael Chandler, this is not the dude that fought Justin Gaethje in Madison Square Garden a couple of years ago. This is a different man. He's much older. And one tidbit I learned about yesterday, he started this camp with an injury. So Michael Chandler was coming in very compromised and for sure looked his age here. So big ups to Paddy Pimblett, but the people saying that he's now a realistic champion, I think, are a little over their heads.
Yeah, we're going to find out later. Later in time. Obviously, Paddy Pimblett moving up, inside the top 10, I believe, top 8 inside the lightweight division. I think he'll get a big one next, whoever it may be in the top 5. I think they're going to, seek to push. I think even Islam's coach, Javier Mendez, said, Paddy Pimblett's not even a bad option for the title. But for me personally, I wouldn't like to see that just yet.
Yeah, for Paddy Pimblett, there's so many fun fights you can do. If it was up to me, I would say he would fight Dan Hooker, who's in the top 5, who's number 5. It's a nice step up, and it's a winnable fight for him. But the way things are heading, like anything can happen. This is such a strange division right now because Islam has beaten so many guys, and some of these older guys are, head on their way out, like Poirier and Gaethje. So I feel like this division is up for the taking if you're not fighting Islam Makhachev. And obviously with Ilia Topuria, it's been at least reported by a Spanish journalist that he's going to be fighting in late June. So who knows? Maybe that fight is Paddy Pimblett because he expressed interest in the fight on the Joe Rogan Experience recently. So anything can happen. And honestly, there's no bad options for Paddy from an entertainment perspective.
Yeah, they have a bit of history. Obviously, Ilya, Paddy Pimblett, everyone knows the hand sanitizer boy situation over there in London. So it would make a ton of sense. The build-up would be fantastic. And I'd like to see it. But let's see what happens next with Paddy and obviously Ilya. Next, though, we had Yair Rodriguez and Patricio Pitbull. I said before, a few weeks ago, Patricio Pitbull sort of not the guy to walk forward and, throw some bombs. He's more of a counter puncher. And if you've got someone like Yair Rodriguez to have an opportunity to tee off against you, it's going to be a bad day in the office. And it was a bad day in the office of Patricio Pitbull. For me, I was so excited to see Pitbull inside the UFC and obviously seeing him outside the UFC in Bellator, lighting up, being explosive, getting these knockout punches. But I think it was a little bit too late now. I think he's too old, a little bit too slow. And I think the caliber of UFC fighters is just way too high and the level is completely different. Against, Yair Rodriguez, I believe is on a 2-fight losing streak, came into this one and sort of just had his way, manhandled him.
Yeah, for Patricio Pitbull, he kind of froze under the bright lights of the UFC here. I hate to say it, but I don't recall him being this timid early on. Usually comes out with those bombs or tries to wrestle more aggressively. But with Yair Rodriguez, he just was flowing out there. I wish he was a little more aggressive too, but hey, he was able to hurt Patricio twice, and he even dropped him. I thought he was going to get the finish there for a second, so he was still really aggressive out there. And he claims that the UFC promised him a title shot with the win here. The UFC, they don't always deliver on those promises, so we'll see. Maybe it's a situation where if Yair wants to wait, eventually Volk beats enough guys to where it makes sense, but the first fight was not super competitive, so I'm not super interested in it. But hey, the UFC is going back to Mexico for a pay-per-view this year, and Yair is one of the top guys, former champion, so they could do it if they're desperate.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm not super interested in that fight either. I'd like to see Volk, obviously, defend against other people before he maybe potentially gets to Yair Rodriguez. Another fantastic performance was Jean Silva versus Bryce Mitchell. This is where obviously we knew how good the striker of John Silva was, but to submit someone like Bryce Mitchell, huge statement, 145 pounds for the Brazilian. We knew how good he was, but I think this was the mark, wasn't it? This was the fantastic fight, the performance that he needed to go out there and get the ninja choke over Bryce Mitchell, who primarily is a grappler. So submitting him is a fantastic statement, and I think 145 pounds, a new contender, is a great look.
Yeah, for John Silva, I had no doubt about his ability to win this fight on the feet. But on the ground, I thought it was Bryce Mitchell's fight all day. But John Silva showed that he's dangerous everywhere, even against a credentialed black belt in Bryce Mitchell. So John Silva, his status just went way up, and the ceiling went way up here. So as I said before, I think John Silva has championship potential, and this only cemented that.
Absolutely. Dominic Reyes getting back in, I'm not going to say getting back, but just producing another fantastic performance, getting that knockout in round 1 against Nikita Krylov. A pitch-perfect shot, counter left, put the lights out of the Ukrainian. Fantastic win for Dominic Reyes. I feel like every time we see him win now, it's just good to see, because obviously the time that he went through, getting that split decision loss against John Jones, arguably he could have won, suffering them losses, and just sort of picking himself back up and going again and now he's on a 3-fight win streak, all by KOs. He's looking good.
Yeah, Nikita Krylov had a 2-year layoff. He was looking good, but in this fight, he fought with 0 fight IQ, and he ran right into those punches from Reyes. And Reyes has his confidence back. That's a big thing in this division. So Dominic Reyes, you can put him right in there with a top 5 opponent, and it would make sense. I would not have said that 2 years ago.
Yeah, crazy to be thinking that on a 4-fight losing streak with 3 by finishes, and then he bounces back now with a 3-fight winning streak, all via finish. It's good to see Reyes back inside the win column, well, still in the win column, and potentially in the top 5, top 10 as well of the world, and potentially getting a good fight, a big fight for him next. Next one is Danny Ige. He came into round 3, if I'm not mistaken, obviously losing against Sean Woodson, who, Sean, I feel like 145 pounds can be tricky for anyone because of his frame, how long he is, the reach. He's going to be a difficult challenge for, a lot of these guys. But the one thing that I kind of said, I think, on the podcast, is I'm worried about how he takes punches. That, the chin, his vulnerability. And I think that showed with a hard hit like Danny Ige. It only took one eventually in the 3rd round when he got there and he found the chin. He finished the fight.
Yeah, you were pretty confident in Ige getting this knockout, if I remember correctly. Danny Ige, he's a great gatekeeper. This is what he does. Sean Woodson is the guy that really excels against those mid-level guys. He looks like a world beater. They can't touch him. And Dan Ige was having a little bit of trouble touching him many periods of this fight, but Sean Woodson was hitting a lot of air, which is why the judges actually had Dan Ige up 2 rounds heading to that 3rd round. So that stoppage is not as bad in hindsight, but still, it was a bad stoppage. He was clearly just pushing Sean Woodson's head down, and Woodson got up immediately. So it's a horrible stoppage, but Ige was going to win anyway, if you ask me.
Yeah, as you mentioned, 2 rounds up. I think it was the Ige corner maybe told him that he was down, and that's why he came out like that, if I remember.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they might have said that it was even or that he was down. But either way, you never know with these judges. I actually thought they might have had Woodson up too, but Dan Ige, in my mind, was up too. But yeah, I always disagree with the judges. So.
Let's talk about the rest of the prelims, Oscar. Obviously, we had Julian Oroso and a knockout against Darren Elkins. Kind of sad to see how the damage is sort of fell in recent years and recent times. Michelle Shashek getting the left hook and the ground strikes against Dumas, and obviously we had opening up the card. We have Norma Coloni getting the submission victory, and obviously we had Marco Tiula, who that was a fantastic fight from start to finish. Trajan Gore was kind of outmatched. Talk to me about the prelims. What excites you? The finishes. Fantastic performances. Obviously Chase Hooper getting the win against Jim Miller. I expected a lot from Chase Hooper. I think he was going to finish Jim Miller, but Jim Miller, veteran, experienced, tough.
Yeah, for Jim Miller, that was kind of a moral victory, not to get finished by the significantly younger guy. But the real highlight for me was Vina Jandiroba getting that decision victory over Yan Xiaonan. She's been in a position to get a title shot for a while. She kind of earned it with her last fight, if you ask me, but Zhang Weili appears to be moving up to challenge the flyweight champion, either Valentina Shevchenko or Manon Fior. So she's set up either way. If Zhang Weili vacates or if they do an interim title, she's right in that mix. And as you pointed out, Jillian Rosa doing that to Darren Elkins, it was a sad watch because you knew that a comeback seemed unrealistic.
Yeah, if this was maybe a couple of years ago, Darren Elkins, when he had a little bit more in the tank, could have been a different story. But seeming like maybe that's catching up with him in the last few years and obviously recent times. It was a great card, UFC 314 to liven it up. I enjoyed it. We had a few other cards as well. I don't know whether you catch them. Obviously, PFL, they returned with an event. Obviously, we have Fabian Edwards versus Impa Kasanya in the main event. Fabian Edwards catching Impa in the 2nd round and knocking him out. For me, was a great win for Fabian. Obviously, him and his brother Leon on top of the cage, celebrating that victory. You never know, that could sort of maybe kickstart the momentum of them both, get back on track. But did you watch the PFL? Obviously, as I talked about, Fabian getting the win against Impa. You know, in my eyes, I obviously I had Impa going in as the favorite, so I thought that was quite a big shock.
Yeah, so these PFL cards always have the biggest upsets, man. You never know who's going to win, especially since a lot of these guys are a little bit older. Sometimes you have expectations for them, and they bring in some young killer, and they do this. This is what they did. They signed a lot of new guys, in the tournament, and they showed out. They beat all of the old card for the most part on this card. So, yeah, a new era for the PFL. And this is what they need. You know, they've had these same crop of guys for a while now, and they've had limited success with them. So maybe some new blood can do them good.
Yeah, Mark DKC obviously made the transition over to PFL, and I believe this was his debut inside the PFL. And unfortunately, he was he had his Bellator fight, but you know, his official PFL debut was this one, and obviously he lost, got ground and pound 32 seconds in, so a tough spot for him. PFL showcase, and that they do have some elite talent. It's good to see Dalton Rosser getting the win against the ESI, former PFL world champion. Good win for him. JJ Wilson getting a fantastic win against Matt Burnell, and that's a great one. Josh Silviera obviously getting a win over Mike Shipman. Yeah, some great fights. I'm looking forward to it. PFL, if you did watch it, I felt like it delivered a lot of finishes, as you can see here. I believe 2 decisions out of 9 fights, so 7 finishes. You can't complain. It was a great event for the PFL. Sort of trying to build some momentum now and heading into the next one. I would like to talk about what's happening this weekend, and that's Ian Machado Garry versus Carlos Prates. A fantastic main event between an Irishman and, or should we say, what's the word? An Irishman that's living in Brazil. I didn't know how to word it, against a natural born Brazilian and Carlos Prates. Obviously, Ian Garry training over there with Charles DuBronx and the shooter box team, I believe, over there, and obviously Carlos Prates with the Fighting Nerds. They've been on a roll this year. Obviously Mauricio Ruffy, Carlo Bajalio, Carlos Prates, and we won't forget Bruno Brazil, but we won't talk about that one. They've been on a roll. 170 pounds main event. Ian Machado Garry off the back of a loss against Shavkat, but there were some good moments, I believe, in there for him. It was a loss, but I think it's going to be more of a learning curve, and he'll only get better. I think he's got that sort of mentality where he'll only get better. He takes on Carlos Prates, and I don't know about you, Oscar, but I'm heavily confident that Ian Machado Garry gets this one done. I think he can finish him, Carlos Prates. I think Ian Garry said that he's seen him quit in the past before he got to the UFC, and I sort of agree with that statement. If you look, his losses outside the UFC, he suffered some losses, but something must have switched. Maybe it was the Fighting Nerds, but I'm not confident in Carlos Prates once he gets to the top 5, top 10 of the division, and I think that's what Ian Garry is. Obviously, he's top 5, and I think he beats Carlos Prates quite confidently. I truly believe Ian Machado bounces back in spectacular fashion and puts his name straight back into the hat.
Yeah, for me, a big reason to pick Machado Garry here is his 5-round experience and the fact that he excelled in those 5 rounds. His 5th round against Shavkat Rakhmonov was his best round. He almost choked him out. And everybody with a Shavkat Rakhmonov bet was sweating bullets when he had that choking. So he showed that he's an elite fighter in the fight. But for being honest, a lot of these fights where he rose up, like the Jeff Neal fight, he's barely winning this fight. The MVP fight, you could have scored that fight for MVP as well. In fact, I scored the Jeff Neal fight against him. So these are very close fights. But with Carlos Prates, I don't like the fact that he's had very low volume performances where he's just waiting for the knockout blow. So if he doesn't land that knockout blow, he's losing on the scorecards. And that's what I think could be happening here, because Machado Garry has okay defense. Is not the best. Like, he's gotten hit pretty hard a couple times, but he is pretty defense centric. He likes to stay on the outside to use that footwork. And oftentimes whenever he gets hit with a big one, he goes straight to the clinch, and he's pretty strong in the clinch. Like, Shavkat could not take him down. He had a very tough time taking him down. And Carlos Prates, I've seen nothing of his ground game. I'm not going to go out there, go and have this false confidence in the Carlos Prates ground game. So I think Prates gets taken down just like MVP did and struggles for many parts of this fight. He might win a round and 2 landing these big shots, but Machado Garry, he has gotten rocked, but he's not gotten knocked out. So I think he can survive if things get tough. And I think he outpoints him to win the decision. It's not going to be the cleanest performance out there, but I think he's a survivor and he's got better cardio and grappling.
If you look at a similar matchup that Garry had, in the past, was obviously that MVP matchup, which was a striker, well, essentially on paper, a striker versus striker matchup. And what we saw in that fight was Garry obviously come on tough times on the feet and was not afraid to wrestle and utilize his grappling, which is, as you mentioned there, elite as well. Very, very good. He showed that against Shavkat Rakhmonov. So I would not be surprised if Ian Garry, makes Carlos Prates whiff and hit some air and, shoot for a body lock and just trip him and takes him down. And maybe he looks for a submission. I think Ian Machado Garry is definitely, more confident as a striker, but he'll have to do what I feel like he's going to have to do what's necessary to win, obviously, and get the job done. I think he wins. I think he beats Carlos Prates. I think it's a great main event. I think we've had 2 fantastic back-to-back main events. I'm looking forward to it. Ian Machado Garry in the main event. He's been talking a little bit of shit this week as well, so it kind of also spices it up as well, till fight day. But yeah, I'm confident Ian Garry gets the job done. It's a fantastic fight. I'm looking forward to it. We'll talk about the co-main event. For me, it's Anthony Smith has been fighting for ages, and 36 years old, and he's had 37 and 21 losses inside his career. He's taken on a Chinese, mountain tiger, he's called, and he's a heavy favorite. And for me, that's justified. If you look at Anthony Smith, there's one thing that this man can't do is take punishment. He crawls up, he puts his guard up. He won't be afraid to just drop down and sort of take them shots. And a guy with him that's stepping across against him, Ming Yang Zhang, he's a heavy hitter. He's a big, big man, and he hits. He's got some steel in his arms. I think he puts Anthony Smith out, maybe not out cold, but I think the ref intervenes and stops this fight. I think this is going to be a beating on Anthony Smith. It's tough to see, but he's been in so many fights, in the years. A lot of damage, a lot of punishment. Definitely catching up.
Yeah, I've been an Anthony Smith supporter for many years now. I think that he has just fought some really tough matchups, and especially with his record being so ugly, this guy wasn't like a real fighter early on. He was just fighting anyone and anybody early on, which is why he had 2 stints in the UFC. He got cut the first time, came back, earned his way to a title shot with John Jones, loses that fight, but he still retires Gustafsson. He still beats Volk and Oezdemir. He's had some relevant wins in the division. I don't care if you think those guys are low level, but those were still highly ranked guys. And even last year, he goes out there and chokes out a Brazilian prospect in Brazil. But this is not the Anthony Smith we see here today. This is a man that lost one of his coaches. And that Dominic Reyes fight was horrible. He wanted to lose that fight. He wanted to get hit. He has said this himself. He was begging to get hit. So that was a horrible performance. And before that, his cardio lets him down against Roman Dolidze. And on the Michael Bisping podcast that he used to be a co-host on, he stated that he doesn't have that desire to train hard anymore. So once you lose that hunger, it's over. And Xiangmin Yang, he's got some ugly losses. Don't get me wrong, but he gets hit. He hits hard. He's hungry. This is all that matters here. I think he knocks out Anthony Smith in round 2 after a lackluster round 1. So Anthony Smith has kind of accepted defeat by retiring here. He knows that he can't put his family through more losses.
Yeah, it's been a tough career for Anthony Smith. But, he made it to a title shot inside the UFC. Not many fighters will be able to say that they've done that. He got there against John Jones, and obviously, if he took a different route that day, he could have been UFC champion after the night. But obviously, he went out there and showed the heart, and obviously carried on after the knee against John Jones. But a tough fight for him this weekend. I ultimately think he's going to lose. A fantastic one to talk about next is obviously Giga Chikadze versus David Onama. I believe this has all the meanings that, don't want to be a fantastic fight. Giga Chikadze, obviously we know his, how good he is, his speciality is obviously striking. He wants to stand and trade. He mixes it up really well on the feet. David Onama, sort of similar, has a lot more power on the feet. Oscar, this one for a fan should entertain, should be good.
Yeah, I love this fight. This is going to be mostly striking, but the thing with David Onama, whenever he gets hit really hard, he does tend to go for that grappling. Giga Chikadze is a very, very weird case. Like, he used to be seen as perhaps a future title challenger heading into that Calvin Kattar fight. He gets the soul beat out of him. It takes forever for him to come back. He returns against Alex Caceres, wins against Alex Caceres, then he gets beat up real bad by Arnold Allen. So Giga Chikadze, I think he's too old to return to that title picture, but I think the skills are still there for him to be competitive with some of these lower level guys like David Onama. David Onama, I don't know what to think of him because I started up, I think he was going to be the real deal. Then he has a really tough fight against Nate the Train Landwehr in a fight where he gasses out horribly, gets just disheartened the rest of the fight. And then also his last fight against Romero, who was a short notice guy in Madison Square Garden. He's nearly finished in that fight against a short notice opponent. So there's so many spots where you think he should just dominate and he doesn't. So I don't really see a title contendership in his future. And Giga, on the other hand, was once in that spot. So I think Giga Chikadze will outpoint him to win this fight. I think his body kicks, obviously the Giga kick to the liver is very effective. He can keep Onama at bay with those strikes. But obviously you could see a scenario where Onama takes him down, perhaps pursues a submission. But I'm going to hope that Giga Chikadze can stuff those takedowns here and maybe catch him with a knee on his way in. So Giga Chikadze is the pick by decision.
Yeah, I love to see Giga Chikadze, the ninja, get back to winning ways. Obviously, showcase that he's, still one of the best in the world, 145 pounds. If you look at his, recent last few losses, Calvin Kattar 3 years ago, and obviously his last one against Arnold Allen, which was 8 months ago. Beat some really, really good guys. I want to see him get back to, finishing guys. When he was finishing guys like Edson Barboza and Cub Swanson, finishing them viciously. That's the sort of Giga Chikadze that we want to see this weekend. I'm hoping it produces. I'm picking him. But ultimately, a tough one against David Onama should be an entertaining scrap for the fans nonetheless. Another one that should be great is between two middleweights that are massive. Two massive middleweights. We've got Michel Pereira, who 6'1", and we've got Abus Magomedov, who's 6'2". Big reach from Abus Magomedov. Came inside the UFC and ultimately, was pushed by the UFC quite early on. He came in against Dustin Stolfus and, lit it up. He had a front kick. He finished his opponent inside a round. He got a short restricted fight. He lost. He lost against Caleb Halio, and he lost that one. But since then, 2 back-to-back losses. He's a big man. He's a problem at 185 pounds. He takes on a Michel Pereira, who's obviously, he's been inside the UFC for a while now, 9-3 inside the UFC. Coming off a loss against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, who obviously had that grappling threat and eventually got the ground and pound finish. Oscar, talk to me about this one. Do you think this one's more favorable for Michel Pereira? Obviously, likes to stand and trade, uses flashy kicks, not so flashy as he once used to be, but more technical, more precise nowadays. Do you think this is a good favorable match for him? Against Abus Magomedov, who was pushed really heavily by the UFC straight away.
Yeah, Abus Magomedov had a very tough start to the UFC. Obviously, he started with the 20-second knockout, but right after they put him in there with Sean Strickland, who would be the champion right after that. And he melted under that pressure. He also lost to Caio Borralho. Not a terrible loss, but he's shown his limitations. Even in the PFL, he fought for the $1 million and got knocked out in the first round. So his chin is unreliable. Even his last fight, Bruno Ferreira, man, that was a tough fight for him. He got rocked in that fight. So I think Michel Pereira is the kind of explosive fighter that will give Abus Magomedov a lot of problems early in the fight. Recently, we've been seeing Abus wrestle more. I feel like if he tries to wrestle, he might just eat a flying knee on his way in. Abus Magomedov will win the fight if it's extended a little longer, because also Michel Pereira is the guy with bad cardio. Usually, his last fight against Fluffy Hernandez, he was in hell after round one. After round one, he was toast. He got coked for 4 rounds straight before he got finished in that 5th round. So Abus Magomedov could outpoint him here if he survives that first round, but I don't see him surviving that first round.
Yeah, a tough one. Tough one's cool. I'm going Michel Pereira. I think he gets the job done. It's good to see his evolution since coming into the UFC against Tristan Connolly, a guy that he lost to in his UFC debut. Obviously, he came in doing backflips and jumps off the cage and stuff like that. Has sort of turned that down a little bit and changed his game. He's more technical, still flashy. More precise with his with striking nowadays. But he's still good to watch on the main card. 185 pounds against Abus Magomedov should be a good one. I've got Michel Pereira on that one. The next one, a great one as well. 170 pounds. We've got Randy Rude Brown against Nicholas Dalby. Nicholas Dalby, obviously former Cage Warriors champion. Obviously he's been inside the UFC. I think he had 2 stints inside the UFC. So it's good to see him kind of still kicking around, doing what he's doing. He last fought Renat Fakadimov, lost a split decision. Before that, he was on a good run though. 4 wins back to back. He takes on Rude Boy Randy Brown, who I think is a fantastic fighter. Lost a split decision against Brian Brattle. Before that, beat Muslim Salikov and S.A. Selecki, winning Wellington Turkman. Had only lost against Jack Della Maddalena in the last few years, and obviously Brian Battle. So for me, I like Rude Boy. I think he gets the job done. He's a moderate favorite according to Sapology, and I'm riding that train. Nicholas Dalby, 40 years of age. Is this the time where starts to catch up to him? The one thing about Nicholas Dalby, he's a gamer, 100% gamer. He come in there and they look to scrap. If you've never watched a fight between him and Ross Houston in Cage Warriors, you've got to go back and watch that. It was an absolute bloodbath. Evidently, it actually got stopped because there was too much blood on the canvas.
The
Mark Goddard, the referee, in that night said, no more. We can't fight like this. An absolute fantastic fight. But for me, I think Randy Brown gets this done. 6'3", massive frame for 170 pounds, a good reach advantage as well. From Nicholas Dalby. I think he gets this one done. It should be a great fight though. It should be really competitive.
Yeah, with Randy Brown, if he can stand the outside the whole fight, he's going to win this fight. It's plain and simple. He only loses when guys close the distance on him, can take him down, can hit him with these big shots. And Dalby has been so tenacious in his last couple of fights. Like, everybody counted him out because of his age, because of the fact that he really wasn't ever ranked. And he goes out there against many prospects and just melts them with his pace. He's got a lot of hunger, but Randy Brown, I just think he doesn't care. He's gonna play it safe in these fights. He's gonna use that jab. He's gonna use that 1-2, and he's gonna be wary of anything that Nicholas Dalby tries to bring to him. Dalby, one thing, doesn't really have the speed to catch Randy Brown, especially with that good footwork that he has. So I think Randy Brown plays it safe and gets this decision as he's known to do.
Absolutely. A fantastic 170 pounds. I'm looking forward to it. Randy Rude Boy Brown against Nicholas Dalby should be a good one at 170 pounds. And next one, 185 pounds. The last one on the main card, we've got Ikram Eliskerov versus Andre Muniz. And this is a fantastic one. Obviously, Ikram pushed again. I talked about, I forgot his name now already. Obviously, Abus Magomedov getting pushed heavily by the UFC. Ikram was another one that was kind of pushed very, very heavily by the UFC. He had a few more fights in the UFC before he got, that big step up. He went 2-0 in the promotion and obviously fought Robert Whittaker in round 1. He just got punished heavily. Robert Whittaker went in there with a game plan to kind of put pressure on him and eventually just overwhelm him. And that's what he did that night. He got the finish. I look at Andre Muniz. What is he? He's a submission threat. Is he going to be able to go in there and pressure him and be able to kind of knock out Ikram Eliskerov? I really don't think so. I don't think, obviously, Robert Whittaker is completely different kettle of fish in terms of striking with Andre Muniz. I think Ikram returns back to winning ways a fantastic prospect. His 2 wins inside the UFC before, he got the, Robert Whittaker fight. He was lighting it up, flying knees, knocking Phil Hawes out devastatingly. I expect the Russian to go back to winning ways. And, I think he's going to go in there, put on performance, and, kind of prove that, he's still one of the best 185 pounds. It's a tough fight for him. If he lets it go to the ground, he could be in trouble. But that's all up to him to keep it on the floor, and I think he will. And I think he'll unleash his lightning striking, his very dynamic striking as well, and potentially even knock out Andre Muniz in the 3rd round.
With Andre Muniz, we thought he was going to be a championship contender when he broke Jacare Souza's arm with that armbar shortly after he submits Eric Anders, shortly after he dominates Uriah Hall on the ground. But I don't think he's shown anything since then. He had that loss to Paul Craig by TKO, which was horrible because not only was he losing on the ground, he lost on the feet to Paul Craig of all people. Paul Craig is not somebody you ever see win on the feet. And then you see the Iron Turtle fight, the Jung Young Park fight. That's a fight you could argue he lost. It all came down to control time, which he got a lot of. But Ikram Aliskerov, guys from Dagestan, the wrestling is for sure superior on his side. So he controls where the fight is going to be, and he wants it to be on the feet. He's going to knock out Andre Muniz. I think he does it fairly easily. I'll say round 2 after he feels him out. Andre Muniz, as I said, got hurt by Paul Craig on the feet. And Ikram, say what you want, but the 2 losses are Chimaev and Whittaker. That's it. Everybody else he's beating, and most of those guys he has a very easy time with. And if you look at his powerful knockouts that like the Phil Haas one, I know Phil Haas is a very chinny fighter, but Andre Muniz is going to be there to hit. So I expect a finish for Ikram.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he's going to go in there and showcase what he's on about. The first 2 fights, he was lighting up. I expect him to do the exact same thing. He's a big favorite according to Tapology, and me and you are quite heavily on him. Matt Chanel versus Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick, the Brick as he's called, before he had his little hiatus and retired from the UFC or MMA in general. He was looking on top of the world. That was back in 2020 when he got a submission victory against Cody Durden, had that flying triangle choke, had a little hiatus, and I think that hiatus has done really bad damage for his progression in his career. Now he's 3, obviously 1-3 in his last 4 fights. A tough spot for Jimmy Flick, possibly a must win, who against Matt Chanel, who probably is the chinniest guy at flyweight, I think it has to be said. Does he get the win against Matt Chanel? I think there is a clear route for victory if you fight Matt Chanel. It's just to kind of put pressure on him and look at the hope you land clean on the chin, because anything probably could knock him out. Jimmy Flick has to go in there and utilize that striking. He has great grappling. We've seen that in the past, but maybe that hiatus away from the MMA caused damage for his progression in his career. Oscar, who have you got in this one? A tough one to call. Matt Chanel versus Jimmy Flick. If I'm going to call that, I think I'm going with Jimmy Flick. The underdog. I think that's a good bet in my opinion.
I'm actually pretty confident in Matt Schnell. If this was Matt Schnell in his quote-unquote prime, like the dude that fought the Tibetan Eagle and got the submission as this huge underdog, I would pick him with great confidence. But this is the guy that retired in his last fight after getting submitted by Cody Durden, of all people. So he's not super dependable, but I will say his striking is so much better than Jimmy Flick. This is not even comparable. Jimmy Flick's striking defense is horrendous. Charles Johnson is not a knockout artist, especially early in fights. He usually cooks the guy later. He got an early finish against Jimmy Flick. So, and also, as you said, during that retirement, I don't think he was leveling up his striking. I think his striking was just about the same, if not worse, when he came back. So, Matt Schnell, I think he's going to outbox him all day. I think Jimmy Flick is a great jiu-jitsu guy, not a good wrestler, I would say. So Matt Schnell will stuff the takedowns, keep it on the feet. Outside of a Jimmy Flick Hail Mary KO, I think we're talking about a Matt Schnell decision 9 times out of 10. Maybe he is the one that gets the knockout win.
Yeah, I'm riding the train for Jimmy Flick. Let's go, Jimmy Flick. I'd like to see a flying triangle again, like he once did against Cody Durden. That would be fantastic to see. But you never know. You never know. Probably not going to happen, but one man can dream, hey? I'd love to dream. Next one, 155 pounds. We've got Evan Elder against Gage Young. Oscar, over to you. Identical records, 9 wins, 2 losses. Fantastic, and USA versus USA matchup. For me, Oscar, talk to me about this one. Obviously, 155 pounds should be a good one. The Phenom versus G Money.
Yeah, for Gage Young, he's the guy that lost on Contender Series, and I don't like picking guys that lose on Contender Series, especially in this new age where they kind of bring anybody on Contender Series. I will say the guy he lost to, Sikild, is a decent prospect. I wouldn't say he's a world beater. Gage Young he has the same record as Elder, but he doesn't have that same quality experience. Elder has been in the UFC like 2 years now. He made his debut against Preston Parsons on short notice. Even in that fight, he got out wrestled, but he was doing all of the damage on the feet. He fights the Wolf from Azerbaijan, Nasir, I believe his name is, and he loses the fight by a cut. But if you watch that fight back, he's winning the fight on the scorecards before the cut. So I won't take that away from him. His last opponent, Darius Flowers, is not a high-level fighter. He fought him in elevation, easily choked him out. So he's still a guy I have confidence in. I see the development with Gage Young, UFC debut. I don't like it. I don't think he has anything that he has shown me to say he's going to be the guy with UFC experience like Evan Elder. Evan Elder has got serious power too, so I think he can knock out Gage Young in round 2.
A fantastic one for 155 pounds. 2 identical records. We've got 28-year-old Evan Elder versus Gage Young, who's 24 years old. You talked about Evan Elder, and also like that bet as well, or the pick, should we say? Evan Elder, 9-2 in his career thus far. Looking fantastic. We talked about obviously that he's had more UFC fights as well. Obviously he's had 4 UFC fights now. 2 wins back to back against Darius Flowers and Gennaro Valdez. Should be a good one at 155 pounds. I expect him to get the job done. Next one, 145 pounds. We've got Chris Gutierrez and John Castaneda. Chris Gutierrez, if we rewind maybe a few years, I love talking about stuff that happened in the past. 2022 to be exact. Chris Gutierrez lands a big knee against our old good friend, a legend inside the sport, Frankie Edgar. Puts him out cold. Loses against Pedro Munoz. Beat Alatanga Haley. Lost against Yadong Song. Beat Kiang Lee. I feel like in these sort of positions, if I'm correct in saying, Chris Gutierrez should win. It's only, as I mentioned there, it's only against Pedro Munoz and Yadong Song where he is lost inside the UFC. And obviously that draw against Cody Durden and a loss against Rohani Barcelos on the final back in 2018. Other than that, he has beat these sort of guys. Do you think he beats John Castaneda, who, quite a similar record, both very experienced? John Castaneda, has up and downs inside his UFC career, but Chris Gutierrez, I believe, is the pick for me.
Yeah, well, Chris Gutierrez, the record looks really good on paper, but a lot of these fights, he struggles in at times, especially on the ground. And obviously, when guys close the distance in on him, it's all about his footwork and his calf kicks. And if he can get that going, he wins a lot of these fights. But with John Castaneda, I think he has the ability to take this fight to the ground. And on the feet, I think he obviously has the power advantage here. Chris Gutierrez is not really a boxer, relies heavily on those kicks. I think he might just get caught with a shot while throwing a kick. And Castaneda will get enough control time to win a split decision here. I feel like Chris Gutierrez has just, he's fought on the edge for so long in these fights, and he's bound to lose one of these decisions, especially now that he's getting a little older. So Castaneda is the pick here. But, it could obviously go either way with Chris Gutierrez using those calf kicks. He could just throw away any game plan that Castaneda has.
Completely agree. Next one, we have 135 pounds. We've got Damon Blackshearer's Alatang Haley. This one, a fantastic one for me. 135 pounds. You know, Damon Blackshear has the power in his hands, I do believe. Alatang Haley, you know, has experience inside the OC. They both do, to be fair. If you look at Damon Blackshear, you know, coming off two submissions in his last two fights. Before that, obviously got lost against Montel Jackson and Mario Batista. Against Alatang Haley, who's 17-9 in his in his career, coming off a win against Clinton Rodriguez. Oscar is the pick. You know, if you look at Tapology there, Damon Blackshear is the moderate favorite. Is that sensible? For me, it's a smart pick, but is that the pick you're willing to take?
I just think Damon Blackshear has been making improvements. He's got more confidence now that he's getting finishes. He's not a boring grappler like some of these other guys that just wants to hold people down. He's chasing those submissions. Alatang Haley has never looked, I would say, extraordinary in the octagon. He gets the job done. He can wrestle. He can strike. Like the Dana Bakary fight was a great example of him just countering the guy on his way in. But with Damon Blackshear, it's a different beast being on the ground with him. The Mario Batista fight. People hate Mario Batista these days. I thought he won that Batista fight. In that fight, he took on a week notice after getting that Twister win. So I see really great potential in Damon Blackshear, assuming he's not fighting a killer like Montel Jackson. He can out wrestle a lot of these guys if he doesn't get hit. So Alatang Haley doesn't have that power that concerns me. So the pick is Damon Blackshear, and I think he gets yet another submission here. I'll say rear naked choke this time.
Yeah, tough one's cool, but yeah, I completely agree with them on Blackshear. I think he gets the job done. Next one, we've got battle between two prospects that are up and coming inside their career. We've got Cameron Simon against Malcolm Wellmaker. Malcolm, obviously 30 years of age, a slight favorite according to Tapology, nicknamed the Machine, versus Cameron Simon, South African, who's 24 years of age, very young. He made it to the UFC quite early on. Obviously, he was 5-0 or 6-0 at that point on the 10 series. Got the job done. He had 3 fights inside the UFC. He looked good, and then he ran into Christian Rodriguez, obviously the prospect killer, and Pelton Tabu, got knocked out in that one. I still think, correct me if I'm wrong, I still think there's a lot to come from Cameron Simon. He's still very, very young. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's taken on Malcolm Wellmaker, who hasn't been beaten, inside his career thus far. He's 8-0. So that is a tough record, but he makes his UFC debut this weekend. He's coming off of getting a fantastic win against Adam Bramheld, where he knocks his opponent out. A lot of finishes on his record, and obviously Cameron Simon coming off a finished loss. Is that the same fate for Cameron Simon, or is he going there and get the job done again?
I think Cameron Simon undoubtedly has a higher ceiling than Malcolm Wellmaker based on the age. Wellmaker making his debut at 30 years old with an 8-0 record. This shows you that this is a guy that started a little late in his career. So I can't really put a lot of stock in him. He's got power. He's got explosivity, which can hurt Cameron Simon. That's how he got finished against Peyton Talbot about a year ago. But I don't think Wellmaker is a Peyton Talbot type. I don't think he's defending these takedown attempts. So I think Cameron Simon will be mixing in those takedowns, wear down Wellmaker, take away that explosivity, and later on the feet he can just outpace him. So Cameron Simon, this young, taking a year off, working at the gym with the likes of Dricus du Plessis, I think he's going to be a better fighter now. And obviously he's got to level up that defense. So I say look out for Cameron Simon. I think he looks better than ever, wins the decision.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. You're 24 years of age, still a lot to come from Cameron. I think he gets the job done this weekend. I like the pick as well. Next one, we've got Jacqueline Honorin versus Poliana Viana. Poliana Viana, obviously the moderate favorite, plus 285 heading into this one. She takes on a Brazilian who's 9-1 in her career, moderate favorite, minus 360. She's 9-1 in her career, as I mentioned. She's looking to improve to 10-1. 3 wins back to back, 2 arm bars in her last 2 performances. Her only loss comes to Sam Hughes, which, if you look at that, had to be a slip up in her UFC debut. since then has looked fantastic. So is the play enormous? Obviously, a lot of people, at Tapology as well, rooting for Poliana Viana. If you look at how she's been getting on the last few years, 2 losses back to back. But if you look at the competition, Gillian Robertson, Isman Lucindo, so she's kind of used to maybe fighting these top level competition back to back. Robertson, obviously a fantastic, elite. Well, I say elite, but a good fighter in the division. Oscar, who have you got on this one? A battle between 2 fantastic Brazilians should be a good one. 115 pounds.
Yeah, but Pollyanna Vienna, that black belt is questionable if you're getting submitted that easily against competitors that obviously Jillian Robertson is legit, but some of these other submission losses, I'm not sure about those. Jacqueline Mormon is a much more credentialed BJJ player, a much more proven BJJ player. Even her debut against Sam Hughes, she dominates that round 1. But after that, her pace just went away and she got beat there. But there's no doubt that Pollyanna Vienna will win this fight if it's just on the feet. She even has a first-round knockout on her record in the UFC. But Jacqueline Mormon will take this to the ground. Will get a lot of control time, but I think she does get an armbar victory or an arm triangle victory in round 2. I just think there's serious holes in that ground game of Viana, even though she's apparently a black belt.
Yeah, tough one to call. Polyam Viana, obviously 2 losses back to back against Jillian Robertson, as I mentioned. Should be an interesting one. I'm liking to see how it goes down. But as you mentioned, Jacqueline, I've got her as well in this one. Next one, we've got Timmy Kiomba versus Roberto Romero. This one, for me, 145 pounds. As you can see there, the records are well matched. 8-3 versus 8-4. Both fighters have contests inside the UFC. Very young as well, 25, 26. Roberto Romero, I believe, had a little bit of a good showcase in his debut. Obviously, still came up short against David Onama. I believe that was on short notice as well. So he came in there. He showed a lot. Showed a lot of toughness. Does he beat Timmy? Second time around, he's got the second crack at the cherry, and maybe a full camp as well. Surely it's going to be better for him in this one. I think he gets the job done against Timmy. I feel like the loss against David Onama obviously was tough, but I feel like he showed a lot in that fight.
I'm a little biased here. Timmy broke the news of his last fight with me, so I thank him for that. But I don't think Timmy listens to this show, so I'm going to keep it real with the people. I think Roberto Romero wins this fight all day. He showed that he was very capable on short notice against David Onama. As I mentioned earlier, David Onama was in real trouble in that fight. I think he even got dropped in that fight, and I'm surprised he was able to make a comeback with Timmy Kiomba. He fights out of Extreme Couture. We already know that's the best gym. If you ask a lot of people in Las Vegas, that's probably the best gym. That's where Strickland trains out of, and many others. But on Contender Series, he wins a close decision. In the UFC, he's lost 2 fights now. So it's tough to see if he's made that necessary next step yet. I know he's training. That's all he posts. All he posts is training. But Roberto Romero, I feel like, is more ready for prime time than Timmy Kiomba at this point. So Romero is going to be the pick by decision.
Yeah, I've got Romero in this one as well. Lighting up the card, the first fight of the evening. Sorry, we got Chelsea Chandler versus the Jocelyn Edwards. Chelsea Chandler, known for running and turning her face and running straight into the cage, which was a fantastic moment for MMA. It was just it was a proper beam moment. If you look at Chelsea Chandler, she's ranked 135 pounds if I'm not mistaken, but never made the 135 pound limit.
Yeah, it really shows the level of discipline we're working with here. Chelsea Chandler obviously became an immortal meme when she ran away from Norma Dumont mid-fight. Jocelyn Edwards, I think, might have her running in this fight too. Edwards, even if she loses, she's going to be throwing high-volume strikes out there. And Chelsea Chandler absolutely needs this fight on the ground, but I don't think she's the best at keeping opponents on the ground. Jocelyn Edwards, I feel like every other fight we're talking about her fighting a grappler where she needs to defend the takedowns, scramble up to her feet, and she's pretty decent at doing it against these lower level competition like Chandler. So I think Edwards will get taken down, but I think she scrambles to her feet and lands more strikes on the feet. I think it's pretty much that simple here. Jocelyn Edwards has had time to improve, while Chandler is a little more raw out there. So Edwards is the pick by decision, and I'm fairly confident in this.
Yeah, I have got Edwards for the pick. I think the biggest battle is if Chandler makes weight, and I've been looking at how she looked at fight week. I've got to say she looks a lot slimmer. Looks like maybe she took this one a lot more serious. So for me, I do expect her to make weight, but at what cost? She's big, at 135 pounds, so it's going to take a lot for her to get down to this weight. And you talked about Justin Edwards, fantastic striker with a lot of pressure, a lot of teeps, a lot of body kicks. It could cause trouble for Charles Chandler, and I also like that pick as well. Justin Edwards should be a good card though, Oscar. From top to bottom, I think we've got some fantastic fights. If there is one that you're picking out that you think is definitely going to entertain, for me, it's Giga Chikadze, David Onama. Who have you got?
Well, you took my pick there. It was Giga Chikadze and David Onama. But I think Ikram Mina's, I think we're going to see something exciting go down there. Even if we see some crazy upset with Muniz getting some armbar, it's going to be wild. But I expect Ikram to throw bombs out there and entertain the crowd. Speaking of the crowd, it's there. It's not your tiny 30-person Apex crowd, which is going to be like 80% family members and teammates. So be excited for this one, if for anything outside of the fact that it's going to be outside of the Apex, which we've had that conversation at death on this podcast, so we won't bore you with that. But the Kansas City crowd was really good last time, so I say this is going to be one of the better fight nights we have this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be fantastic. I don't know if you're a boxing fan as well. We got Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn this weekend. That in itself should be a fantastic one for the Brits. We've got Vidal Riley on the card as well. Anthony Yard, Lyndon Arthur. A fantastic card for the Brits. For me, should be a good one. I've got Chris Eubank in that one. I think he's the bigger man. He's the stronger. He's faster and more clinical on my feet. Conor Benn, I feel like hasn't been really tested yet in his career. And I think this is the first, big test, whereas Chris Eubank has been there, done that sort of already inside his career. Should be a good one. I'm watching that this weekend as well. So if you're shy for stuff to watch before the UFC, whack on Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. Should be a great little warm-up for when the UFC starts. Oscar, though, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk. We're obviously in Garry versus Carlos Prates this weekend. Should be a good event. Oscar, any last send-off words before we let them all go?
Yeah, I think we'll be back next week to break down the card. Hopefully, we have Ian Machado Garry proving himself out there. I'm not a big fan of the guy, but I like to be right with my picks above all. It's nothing personal. And the week after, got another card not in the Apex. It's in Des Moines, Iowa. Corey Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. So that is an even more interesting main event, if you ask me. So stay tuned for that breakdown next week.
Yeah, should be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. Catch us all next week. As we talked about, in Garry versus Carlos Prates should be a good one this weekend. Make sure you're watching that. Should be a good fight for the fans in general. We've got fans back in the arena. It's always good. Make sure you catch us next week. Thank you very much for joining us. And a very